In this episode of Louisville Unveiled, the team talks with real estate attorney Liz Lamb from Pitt and Frank.
Welcome, Liz. So let's get into it. So what do you guys do?
Well, we are a title agency. And so with that, we assist with the closing process. So once you get your house under contract, you can send that contract over to us, and then we get a title order from either you all, if it's a cash transaction, or when I say you all, I mean your clients, obviously, or the lender, and we'll go through preparing a title exam and processing your client's title so they can close with clear title.
So why is title so important?
Title is absolutely so important because if you don't investigate what happens in the title process, when you purchase a home, you could actually take your property, take title ownership is just another term for that. They're interchangeable, but have a conflict of interest with someone else who has an interest in your title before you did. And that wouldn't be discoverable unless we did a title exam.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so you do the title exam, but then there's also something like title insurance. Yes. And that is highly recommended for the buyers to get as well. So can you explain that?
Absolutely. So with a title exam is going to uncover all problems that are related to title search. For residential, it goes back 30 years. For industrial or commercial, it's going to go back 60 years. So it'll pull everything that's on title for a 30 to 60 year period. And that's going to keep you protected because what we'll do is go through and clear any issues on title prior to closing. What title insurance does is going to protect you for anything that doesn't come up on that title exam, because unfortunately, I know we live in an era of technological advancement, but there's still always human error. Yeah. Sure. And so with that, this is going to protect you if there was something that came up on the exam, that didn't come up on the exam that wasn't discoverable, or if you get one of our enhanced policies, which we always issue to our clients at Pitt and Frank, unless someone doesn't want it or you're an investor client, you will be protected with post-closing issues as well. So that includes mechanic liens as well as any forgeries that come up post-closing. If someone's trying to sell your land out from under you, they can't really do
that. Doesn't happen,
yeah. It happens too often. So to ensure you're protected, I always recommend a title insurance policy. And there's one in place for the buyer, but you will also be required to purchase one if you have a lender as well.
I was going to say, can you explain the difference between an owner's title insurance and a lender's title insurance?
Yeah, absolutely. So the lender's title insurance is obviously going to protect the lender, whereas the owner's title insurance is for the owner. And if you don't have a lender, so this is a cash transaction, you're only going to have the owner's title insurance. There's really no need for the lender because there's no lender involved. So with the lender, that just ensures that their interest is first in line and protected in case anyone comes out of the woodwork later and has a claim against the property. So that protects the lender's interest. The owner's title policy is going to protect your interest from someone coming to foreclose on the property. Let's say there's a prior mortgage that was never released and the bank is coming to foreclose on that. This is going to address some issues with that and go over your coverage and determine, what can we do to preserve your title, your interest in this land with all this money that you've paid to purchase your home.
Okay, so I got a question for you.
Yes.
You've got to have some stories. Tell me a story of somebody not, or maybe even if you did find a situation where, oh, wow, okay, but
so just tell you a story.
Tell me a story.
Unfortunately, I've got two stories. So I have the tale of two cities almost. So It's the tale of two title holders, so to speak. So one of them did not get title insurance and one of them did. The one that did not get title insurance had a title exam done. Everything came back on the title exam. We went through the process of clearing everything that came up on title. But unfortunately, due to human error, as I mentioned, there was a lien that was actually misindexed under our indexing when you look up things under the public record. So instead of it popping up under the appropriate names to be attached to the appropriate property. It was misindexed and misfiled under another property, but it was actually held against their property. So it was something.
But it was misindexed by the government, not by you.
Not by us. Yes.
Making sure.
No, thank you for the clarification. Yes, misindexed by the government, but due to that, the title examiner who searched through the records did not find that, and we did not have the opportunity to clear that lien prior to closing. So that just means that the individual who took the property subject to that lien wasn't protected because they didn't have any title insurance in place to protect them for that interest that is against the property. So they initiated a foreclosure action on the property, and they had to go through the foreclosure of the home, sell their home that they just bought, and then the proceeds were split and they were back house shopping.
So that really answers one of my questions I had, which was, I've been asked by clients, well, if they're doing a title search, why do I need this insurance? And that's a prime example. It wasn't that you missed it on the search. It was that it wasn't labeled, it wasn't in the right box, essentially.
Absolutely.
At downtown.
Yeah.
And so there was no way for you guys to find it.
And we actually aren't even the ones who sit there and go through and do your title exam. So fortunately, another layer of protection that we offer at Pitt and Frank is we write through the three major title companies. We write through Chicago, which also is under the family of Fidelity. We write through Stewart as well as First American. And so within each of those, they have underwriters, and their underwriters actually perform the title exam. So the individual who is writing your insurance policy has also been the same person who's gone through and searched through the title and actually found all of the liens. So they know exactly what they need to put in place when they're issuing your title policy to ensure you're protected. So what we do is when we get the raw data back of what they've found on that title exam, we'll go through and start clearing the individual things on there. So as I mentioned, maybe there's a prior mortgage that was never replaced, or maybe there was a prior mortgage that was never released. So not by the seller, but maybe a previous owner. We'll go behind the scenes and contact that closing company that handled that closing to determine whether or not appropriate funds were paid so that we can go about on your client's behalf and get that lien released so that you can close with a free and clear title. So that's something that's a little bit different, is we're not actually the ones going through and performing the search. We rely heavily on our underwriters who write the policy as well to perform that. And if they don't find it, which they're the experts, then you want to make sure that you're insured for something that could come up later down the road. Because as you said, I mean, it's not super common where you have something that does come up, but if it does, it's not couple $100 to fix. It's usually in the thousands, or it's your whole home. And you pay, a one-time fee at closing for title insurance. It's not a monthly fee. It's not something that comes out during the duration of your home. It's a one-time fee paid at closing for peace of mind.
It's relatively cheap too, right?
Comparatively, yes, absolutely. It's all based on the purchase price of your home. And so that's set at a market rate as well.
What was the good story?
I know I was going to say that was the bad story. The good story is the tale of the other title holder who did have the insurance policy. And not only did they have the owner's insurance policy, they got the enhanced policy that our firm offers that we can write through any one of the three major underwriters. So the enhanced policy, as I mentioned, also covers things that happen post-closing. So I had mentioned a forgery of someone trying to sell land out from under. We had a property owner who had purchased some investment property out in I believe it was Taylorsville, and a bunch of vacant land out there. And with vacant land, a common scheme in our industry, which is very unfortunate, is that there's a lot of seller fraud. And so with that, this person had a title policy on the property, and they were able to ensure that when this other individual came along trying to fraudulently forge deeds to sell the property, that they weren't protected from that. So they aren't going to have to pay anything in relation to that. This policy covered them and made sure that they didn't have to participate in any of the costs related to recovering or going back through and undoing that title nightmare that resulted from somebody clouding up title with fraudulent deeds.
Do you find there's problems when it comes to women that have to change their names?
I actually do, and I'm facing that problem here very soon.
That's right.
So I recently changed my name from Liz Treader to Liz Lamb, and so that does actually come up a lot in our title search process. Even if you don't change your name, what happens when we do a title search is we will search under both names. So we'll search under your maiden name, and then we'll search under your current name, and we'll pull every lien out there for anybody vaguely associated with you. So let's say you were a Karen Smith. God love Karen Smith. If you were a Karen Smith, there's going to be a lot of other Karen Smiths out there, and more likely than not, you're going to have a lot of liens that are filed against Karen Smith. So we go through and we make sure that all those Karen Smiths aren't you. And so that's why it is important to have and check for both marital names. But yes, there are problems that come up with that if those haven't been documented accordingly.
How long does it typically take to do a title search?
Well, it can just depend. Again, if we're doing, a residential title search, which is primarily what we deal with at our firm, that can take anywhere from 2 days to 5. But if there's more issues that come up in the title exam as the examiner goes through, it could also take longer. But typically 2 to 5 days is a pretty quick turnaround. If for some reason, let's say a piece of property has been held in a family for let's say like 90 years, that's going to require a longer title search, and that might take more time because not only will they have to search the online records, the examiner will have to physically go down to the courthouse and look through paper records in order to determine whether or not things have been filed.
Paper records?
Paper records, I know. They'll have to go through the stacks in the county recorder's office and ensure that all the deeds are in place that effectively transfer the property in succession over time properly.
It's a lot of work.
When I first got started, I think it was like maybe my second transaction in real estate. I had a client who thought, I bought a car, it's a lemon, let it go years ago, right? And so we get to the point where we're ready to close. And of course, the creditor says, we want $5,000. So the attorney calls me, the bad news, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what do I do? So they actually took the time to call the creditor to say, look, you can settle for $2,000, or you can cause this person not to buy a house, but you'll never get your money, right? So of course, my client had to come out of pocket, $2,000, settled it. But for me, that was an important lesson for me to learn how important the title company worked on behalf of the buyer. You know what I mean? It was huge, because I didn't know anything, save the deal. So from that point forward, I try to just tell clients how important it is when we get to the title company, how important it is to be patient during that time. It's kind of quiet. Everybody's doing their background checks on the property, on you, the buyer, and the seller, to make sure that everything flows, equally and it closes. So it was really important. It was just a lesson learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, if it's a successful closing and experience for your clients, is if they don't hear anything. Because if we don't have to get them involved, that means we and our back office staff are doing everything we can to get liens cleared in the background without your clients even knowing. There are so many things that I think that a lot of home buyers don't know are a part of the closing process. And it's simply because we do all this back end stuff to get these liens cleared that they might not even have anything to do with. Like somebody has a judgment lien on the seller, but because of statutory requirements, that's fallen off and it's no longer a valid lien, but it still comes up on a title search and we have to clear it. So without contacting you all and raising alarm and making your buyers nervous, especially if you got first-time home buyers, it's a scary process.
Yeah, it is.
And we want to ensure that everyone has a really smooth, seamless closing. So we'll take care of it up until the point where we have to get your clients involved. And typically that's just because if we do have to get them involved, we're a third party contacting secured entities like their bank on their behalf, and we have to have them on the line to do that for them.
Sure.
But for the most part, we're able to take care of most issues without your clients even knowing, and so that when they get to the closing table, they have no idea all the liens that we've cleared before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or names or things that they're associated with.
Exactly.
And that's really why we wanted you on today, because most people don't know what all you guys do. They just show up at your office and sign some paperwork, and they think that that's all that you guys are doing. There's so much more behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, like take for example, I mean, a lot of our audience here, they may not, because you mentioned judgment lien. I mean, there's judgment liens, there's mechanical liens, there's all these different types of liens that they may not even be aware of. So explain what judgment lien is then.
A judgment lien is going to be something that was actually issued by a court. So that's something that someone has gone to court over with an issue to litigate, and the judge has ruled in their favor and has issued this lien that's either attached to the person or the property, most likely the property in this case, since we're in real estate.
Yeah.
And you can't close until that lien has been satisfied. So we are obligated to withhold proceeds from, for example, the seller is where this is going to come up. There's going to be some issues with this. Let's say you have a seller who has a judgment lien. You know, they didn't pay their county taxes and they're delinquent on their taxes. You know, we are going to make sure that we collect those items that need to be paid at the closing table so that when title is transferred, that's cleared same day. And we facilitate in the background, going back and forth, having those conversations with the seller, like, hey, you know, you got some liens against the property and we have to clear these up. And so your buyer isn't even involved, doesn't have to know that we're working with this to get this settled, but that we can go back and forth and, you know, make sure we have everything paid off and in a row when you get to the closing table. But that's a judgment lien. That's by the court. Mechanics lien is going to come into play if someone's done work on the property who has not been paid. And surprisingly, that happens a lot as well. So, you know, Sam comes out to paint the house. Sam paints half the house, and the buyer or whoever the seller, thank you, the buyer of the services, the seller of the home decides they don't want to pay Sam for the job that he's done on the house because they didn't like the shade that they picked. Well, Sam can go down to the courthouse and record a mechanics lien, which means that he can't sell that property with clean, marketable title until he gets paid. So oftentimes we'll clear those up at the closing table as well.
Is there ever a time, like if we're working with a seller, we could find out some of this stuff ahead of time?
Absolutely. So that's something that certainly by just going online and searching your seller's name in the county deed records or whatever county that you're working in, you'll be able to find some preliminary information. But if you're concerned with a seller or you just want to learn a little bit more about the property, you can always contact our office and have a preliminary title search done on the property as well. And that's really nice because then when you're marketing yourself to your clients, you can say, we've already had a title search done. Everything's come back clear. We've already begun the process of clearing a lot of these things. We can close within, especially if it's a cash deal, you know, and within a couple of days. That's very attractive to a lot of buyers to already be able to market your property as having clear title. And then of course, up until the day of closing, we'll have our title examiners do a refresh or a relook at the title, just to ensure nothing's come up from when they ran that initial exam to the day of closing.
It was interesting what you said, that you guys would do that. Like let's say I'm working with a seller, getting ready to list the house. I'm like, well, let's do a title search. I've got a great person that can help you out.
Yes, you do.
Before we actually list it, so we can be clear on all this, and it'll help the process in selling this home.
Absolutely.
So it made me wonder, are all title companies the same, or what makes you different than some of the others?
Well, I mean, just within the Louisville area and with Pitt and Frank, we've been in place since 1990. So we've been in practice for over 30 years now. And with us, there's only a handful of other firms, I think maybe 3 or 4 that have been around for several years in the Louisville area. You'll see a lot of title companies pop up left and right over the years, but they oftentimes don't stick around. So you only see this main group that have been in the title world for an extended period of time. And the reason for that is just because they offer different services or have different connections with different people that can provide different things. And so within our firm, we are not only Pitt and Frank, a title agency, we are Pitt and Frank, a law firm. So we are actually a bifurcated business in which we can offer title services, but we also are a full service law firm. So that distinguishes us from our competitors.
You all did my will
We did.
a couple times.
Oh.
I keep changing it up.
You can change it as many times as you want, Mike. I'll take care of it for
Yeah,
you.
thank
He
you.
can add me to it as well.
There you go. I think you might want to get in on that.
I think so, me too.
I don't have that much. I've got a question. I'd like to go back to liens. If someone has a lien attached to that person, how does that affect the closing, or does it at all?
It does affect the closing. So a lot of times with liens, it can get a little tricky just depending on the type of lien, especially if there's a lien against the person. So if there's a lien against the person, that will likely need to be satisfied at closing, which is why we go through all the marital names, your maiden name and then your current name, to make sure if there is something that's popped up that it's not you. But then if it is you, we then go through and determine, okay, has the statute of limitations run on this lien? Because sometimes they're of record, but depending on the type of lien it is, they can expire within 6 months to a year to 2 years, unless they've been resubmitted or refiled. So we'll go through that process to clear the lien as well. But if we can't achieve it through that way, then yes, that could prevent closing.
So if you get a judgment against yourself, wait for a while to buy a house. or if you have a judgment against someone, you've got to make sure that lien gets renewed if you want your money.
Absolutely. You do have to refile for certain liens, and that is a different area of the law that I don't practice in.
So a lien against a person on the seller's side, I mean, like if there's...
Or the buyer's side, I guess, would affect it as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, there could be like if they're garnishings with child support or something
Absolutely.
like
That comes up quite a bit. I just had one actually. I worked with Becky as one of our most seasoned paralegals, and she's been with our company for over 20 years. I love her too.
Actually, I love everybody there.
I do
Those
too.
are also nice.
But she's just the first one that comes to mind because I just dealt with this with her, that we were having to collect garnishments for someone who was not paying child support.
As the seller?
As the seller.
And it comes out of proceeds.
And it comes out of proceeds at closing.
Mama's getting paid.
Oh, for sure. The baby's getting paid. So,
That's true.
Yeah.
yeah, that comes up quite a bit.
And on the buyer's side, they have to pay for it for their clothes. So it's additional funds to bring to closing.
Yeah, with the buyers, that's why I tell them, tell your lender everything.
Everything.
Do not hide.
You want a
anything.
story? I've got a story
wanna
for
hear
you.
it.
So
I love stories.
I think I've shared this story with you. I've been at the closing table with a husband and wife, speaking of maiden names, where the husband and wife, we were going through all the paperwork. They've been married for about a year, real sweet couple. We finally get to the name affidavit, the affidavit that's signed that goes over all those names that pop up when we do a credit search and when we do a title search. And it had her maiden name, which he had expected to see, but it had another name, which he had not expected to see. And come to find out, she revealed at the closing table that she had been married before. And he had no idea. So to really set the scene, we're at a closing table. There's me, a title attorney. There's the sellers, there's the buyers, there's their agents, and there's the lender. It's a full room. And then between the two buyers, husband and wife husband finds out for the very first time that wife was married before and had no idea.
So did you start divorce papers?
They actually did close. So they took a break and then went back in the room and they were able to close that transaction. But I always bring that up to the point that there's no secrets in the home buying process, especially if you're buying or applying for a loan with someone jointly. There's no secrets.
Yeah, the tension in that room.
Tell your lender everything. Be upfront as best you can.
Got a question. I've always heard in Kentucky it takes 1 to buy and 2 to sell. What does that mean?
That is dower rights. So actually, if you've heard of dower rights, it's pretty antiquated. So I believe we're actually just one of 3 states left in the nation that do
We're
this.
married.
Are you really?
Secretly.
Well, you know, you're going to have to
tell
sign
nobody.
off on everything that
I'm
he
going on
goes
that
to
will,
sell.
too.
You better. You better. So how dower rights work in the state of Kentucky is if you are married, you can go out and purchase whatever property you want at any time. But when you turn around and sell that property, even though your name was the only one on that deed when you bought it, your wife has, or husband or partner has to sign off on the deed of the property that you're selling, because they have to acknowledge that you are conveying away their marital interest. That's what a dower right is. For the time in which you're alive, your spouse has a marital dower rights interest in the property.
Is that all property that they've owned? Like, what if they owned a house before and then they get married? It's still in your name. Is she or he entitled to
A dower rights interest, yes.
So before we get married, we're going to go look for a house.
Okay, no, wait. Okay. Y'all don't confuse me. You've been keeping secrets from me.
Now, Mike has a house right now.
And I have a house.
And you have a house.
I got
And
2.
it's just I
I don't have any.
He's got the lake.
oh yeah, I've heard about the lake house.
It's not a lake house. It's a cabin
Same
at best.
I've still not been invited.
Well, come on. Come on down.
That in exchange, I'll take a lake weekend. Our will. But yes, let's say both of you own your respective properties individually, nobody else's name is on the deed. Then you get married and you decide you want to sell. Mike, she's going to have to sign off on that property, and likewise, you're going to have to sign off
too.
on his.
Whatever you need.
That one half.
My neighbor, it was so crazy. It's crazy, but it's sad. So my neighbor across the street, and I moved in, he had been there for 40 plus years, right? He took care, I'm on a corner lot. So he would always cut all the yards. You know, he was just the best neighbor ever. So during COVID, he called. He's like, Kathy. I'm like, yes, sir. His wife on the floor. They're doing CPR. She passed.
Oh.
But I didn't know they weren't married. And he kind of was a little illiterate, sort of, didn't really learn a whole lot. So some of the stuff he couldn't read. And she had always told him that he had a lifetime tenancy on the will. That's what she had been telling him. So literally, as he's planning the funeral, like literally 2 or 3 days, he's out cutting the yard. Her ex-husband of 40 plus 50 years ago literally pulls up with the locksmith. She never took him off the deed. So they went through, like he, threatened them all the legal stuff. And unfortunately, because he built the garage, he put a new, air conditioning unit. I mean, he's been there. He took care of the house. He had to go.
And he has no protection, no interest.
Nothing.
That's why.
So make sure you get married.
Well,
And make sure you update your deed.
Update everything. And so what I advise a lot of people, if they're not married and they're going to buy a property together, I advise them first to talk with you guys to see the best way for them to take the deed.
Yes.
And we can talk about that. But also, does it help, because I think it would, for them to come up with their own contract between the two of them, have it notarized that if and when we don't like each other, this is how we're going to do this.
Absolutely. And we prepare documents like that all the time in conjunction with closing. And again, that's something that we can do as a law firm. An additional service that we can provide for some of those more complicated transactions is ahead of closing. You got boyfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend, mom and dad. I mean, whoever is buying a piece of property with somebody else that they are not married to.
And that happens more and more now.
Yeah.
All the time.
Especially
incredibly common.
the amazing millennials.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't want to get married. So this is good information for them.
So simply, if you just have a friend that you want to purchase a property with too, I've seen a lot of that.
Hey, come on.
Hey, friend. So
we're
in that
maybe doing a
scenario,
cohabitation
Hey, friend.
instead.
I'm going to the lake. You can have my house. So in that situation, if we are in that situation, we have two people that are unmarried. One person has children. Would a will trump the dowry rights in the state of Kentucky? So if that house, if they added that person to the deed and that person dies, but they wanted to deed that house to their children, would it be split?
So this is a little bit more of a complicated question. Okay. Dower rights actually, I'm going to break it down a couple of different ways. But first off, dower rights only exist during the duration of someone's lifetime.
Gotcha.
So dower extinguishes upon death. So there's no longer a dower rights interest. However, per Kentucky statute, there is a spousal right if you are married that you can have in a property even if dower has been extinguished. But that's separate from this because these are two people who aren't married, correct? Okay, so then that's when it goes back to the deed, when it's important to have your clients call us, because there's a couple different ways we can set up the deed to ensure where the property is gonna go if someone passes away. So let's say, Mike, you all are cohabitating.
And we know I'm dying first.
But we want to make sure, do you have kids?
Lord, no.
My kids, not even the same sex.
I love my nieces and nephews and great nieces. I'm just not a big kids person. They're cute and all, but I'd rather get a puppy.
We don't have to worry about that then, but you have kids.
I did.
Okay, so
listen up, Buttercup.
in this situation,
Right of survivorship.
absolutely. So that's where you want to determine, do you want to take title as tenants in common or tenants with the right of survivorship? And if you're in the state of Indiana or some other states, it's called tenants by the entirety, because I also practice in Indiana too. So I'm over there as well. But back to Louisville, tenants in common and right of survivorship. Tenants in common mean you both own a 50% interest in the property, the right to use the entire property in common, but if one of you passes away, that interest is going to be governed by your will or the intestacy laws of the state of Kentucky if you die without a will. If you take it as tenants with...
One step. Yes. Do not die without a will. Wills are so cheap to get done.
Don't do that.
It's huge.
It is huge.
So many people don't have a will, and you don't want the government to decide what's going to happen. Yeah. You want to take control. So back to your will, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're just fine. So that's what I had mentioned with intestacy. If you die without a will, there's a statutory hierarchy, so to speak, of where your assets go upon your death, just depending on who's left in your line of succession or in your family members. And so if you don't want certain people to get certain things, or you really, really wanted, all of your kids to have this and this person to not have this, that you have to have a will in order to have that in place. But anyway, back with the right of survivorship. If you took it with right of survivorship and one of you passes away, instead of that interest being governed by your estate planning or the laws of Kentucky statute, your interest automatically upon your death passes to the other person. So Mike, if you pass away and you have right of survivorship, she's got it all. She's got
Don't kill me.
Whole lake house.
I want to live longer.
There is a slayer statute. So if somebody kills, yes, it's called.
I've heard of that.
Yes.
No.
So the slayer statute. So if you,
Listen.
Yeah. So don't be killing Mike because you won't get the full property. Yeah. So that's what.
I'll let you live.
For now.
For now.
I'm just. Maybe we shouldn't video this part.
No, I want it all on video. I want evidence.
People are going to come back when you guys get married.
Yeah.
I'll wear a ring next time, just like that.
Oh, you have to. Close up on it.
So that's why it's really important with these non-married couples, people who are cohabitating. If somebody passes away, how they took it is going to distinguish, is it going to go to your estate and your heirs or whoever you have selected, or is it going to go to the other person that you're sharing the property with, especially if things end poorly.
Right.
You want to ensure that that's going to go to
which is more common than they end friendly.
Unfortunately, yes.
It's funny because most people have no idea about that, or even that there's a way to take title. So I always talk to, even when they're married, I always have them, you need to talk with the title company to make sure that this property is deeded the way you both have decided you want it to happen. Because it's not always one or the other. I know it's more common that it's with right of survivorship, but not everybody wants to do that, especially blended families.
Like everything in life now is a business deal, like it's an affair.
You just have to protect yourself and do it right the first time and spend the time. This is another reason why you hire a realtor, because these are things that we know and can counsel you on. People don't know what they don't know.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
And so oftentimes when you're at the closing table and you see all these title and you're like, why are they charging what do they got all this charging for? I'm like, well, let me tell you something.
Yes.
Mary.
Yeah.
People don't look like that. It's a closing table.
Yes, they do.
I've seen all types.
I don't think so. Don't
they do.
Remember.
Yes, they do.
Everybody's great.
So just to recap on something. So, I tell Mary all the time, for me as a realtor, the most important thing is education, right? So once they seal that file up from the lender and send it to you, can you briefly just go over the steps and how you put in your credits and debits, seller and buyer, and then close it, send it back so that we can get the clear? Because a lot of people just are not privy of that important piece right there, because they're always like, what are my numbers? We'll get them. Hold on just a
Why does it take so long?
Why does it take so long? So can you just take it from right there?
Absolutely. So what happens when we get that initial title request from the lender? Because most transactions you're going to be dealing with a lender. We get that title request. So we send off that request for title, and it takes a couple days for us to get that back. In the meantime, there's not really much we can do other than just gather contact information, obtain everything that we can. But until title comes back, we really just kind of have to wait because we don't have anything to process. Once it comes back, we know, what mortgage there is that's outstanding on the property. And then from there, we can go ahead, contact that lender, get that amount, and try to figure out those preliminary figures of what's going to be needed for a payoff. We'll be able to calculate how much interest do we need to collect to ensure that we've got enough interest in place for the payoff to hit the bank, and make sure everybody gets paid so the seller or buyer, whoever, isn't going to owe more after closing, so that we're all settled up to the day. So that preliminary number that we send out on the Alta statement to you all to share with your clients and go over like a week or so before closing usually changes a little bit when you get up to the closing table, because we sometimes...
Did you say a week before closing? Oh, how wonderful that would be.
That would be sweet.
It would be.
It would be sweet.
It would be. Well,
Sorry.
the preliminary,
I'm
the seller, I should say, not the Alta, but perhaps the CD that's sent by the lender.
Sorry, I had to give you a little bit.
I know. I wish it was that way. If I was doing it all the time, I would strive my best for it to be that way. But I rely heavily on our processors and paralegals in the office to help me call people to make sure we're getting all the numbers we need to fill out the Alta statement, because I don't necessarily, as the title attorney, get involved with the transaction right at the get-go. So usually if there's no issues with title and it's pretty straightforward, the first time I might get involved is at the closing table when I'm meeting the clients and going over the paperwork, because a lot of times it's just very straightforward.
Correct.
But oftentimes I'm pulled in earlier to help figure out, okay, we're going to need to get a little creative with this payoff, or we're going to need to figure out how to coordinate with this lender who's also over in California, and there's a 3-hour time difference, and we're closing in the morning, but they open at 9 and it's 10 over here, So
And with that, and thank you for answering that, can you talk about what prepaids and closings are and how they affect that CD? Because a lot of people don't know what comes off at the beginning, what comes off the purchase price, and what comes off at the end. So that's another, piece that we try to explain when we get that closing disclosure in time.
yeah, so seller prepaids, that's what it is. It's prepaid.
Yes, and those include like the title searches and, those fees that are associated with it.
Yes, so those are all the fees that are going to be taken care of that come up front versus the closing costs, which is going to be something that happens that is going to be after that title search leading up until closing.
So Liz, we really appreciate you coming out today. It was very informative. I hope that everybody watching is able to learn something. Is there anything you want to add?
I think we've covered quite a bit. If you have any questions regarding the title process, every file is going to be unique and every home buying experience is different and everyone's buying and selling for different reasons.
You mean you can't do it just online and put it in in your cart and be done with it?
I'm sure you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. No, you want something that's tailored to you, and that's exactly what our firm does at Pitt and Frank. We tailor every experience to you. Every file is different, and we give each file the attention that it needs. An attorney's looked it over, and that's something that not every title company in the area is going to be able to offer you. And then we can also work with you to create creative solutions for any issues that might come up with title for easements, or like I said, if we have to clear some liens, call some people, we can help with that. And that's all because we are able to work together as a team, and we've been connected in the Louisville area for 30 plus years. So we know everybody in the industry knows us. So we're able to make those phone calls and pull those strings up until the 11th hour to get a closing done for you and your clients. But with that said, if you all have any questions, you always can call me.
Oh, we do.
And I look forward to your calls.
Exactly. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of Louisville Unveiled, 3 agents, 1 city.